Hello everyone. Let's look at a question from the 2020 question paper today. Passage को पढ़ने से पहले question पढ़ते हैं to see what is expected from us. So the question says, what is the most logical inference from the above passage? तो passage से inference निकालना है. अब हम passage पढ़ते हैं. In Part 3 of the Constitution, which assures people certain fundamental rights, Article 25 proclaims that all persons are equally entitled to freedom of conscience and the right freely to profess, practice, and propagate religion. What people fail to notice is that this proclamation is prefixed with the words subject to public order, morality, health, and to other provisions of this part, which set conditions precedent for the legal protection of religious practices of any community. The closing words of this prefatory rider in Article 25 virtually constitute a subordination clause placing other fundamental rights mentioned in Part 3 over and above the right to religious freedom. Among those other fundamental rights is the right to equality before law and equal protection of laws, assured at the outset and elaborated in later articles to mean, inter alia, that the state shall not deny equal protection of laws to any person or group of persons on the basis of religion alone. ओके सो ये पैसेज हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के बारे में है, हमारे फंडामेंटल राइट्स के बारे में है. अब डिटेल में देखते हैं इस पैसेज को. तो फर्स्ट लाइन में कहा है कि इन पार्ट 3 ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन विच अश्योर्स पीपल सर्टन फंडामेंटल राइट्स, आर्टिकल 25 प्रोक्लेम्स दैट ऑल पर्सन्स आर इक्वली एंटाइटल्ड टू फ्रीडम ऑफ कॉन्शियंस एंड द राइट फ्रीली टू प्रोफेस, प्रैक्टिस एंड प्रोपगेट रिलीजन. राइट, तो इसका मतलब है कि according to the third part of our constitution, every person has the right to profess, practice, propagate religion. Right, this means that we are allowed to belong to any religious faith. We can practice and spread that religion. Okay, we are entitled to that right. मतलब हम इस right के हकदार हैं. Right, we are eligible for this right because we are citizens of India. राइट, किसी भी धर्म को मान सकते हैं और उसकी वृद्धि में हम योगदान दे सकते हैं. ये एज सिटीजन्स ऑफ इंडिया हम इसके हकदार हैं. ओके, नाउ बट देयर इज अ सर्टेन कैविएट हियर, मीनिंग दैट दिस इज नॉट द एंटायर थिंग. राइट, because the next line says what people fail to notice is that this proclamation is prefixed with the words subject to public order, morality, health, and to other provisions of this part, which set conditions precedent for the legal protection of religious practices of any community. So basically this right has a prefix. Prefix means something that comes before it, and this prefix in this case it changes the meaning of the right. Right, जो ये जो prefix है ये clause के पहले आता है, और what this clause is doing in this case is that it is placing certain conditions. Right, हमारे right to freedom of religion पे कुछ conditions डालता है. So what are these conditions? It says the prefix is subject to public order, morality, health, and other provisions of this part. This means that you cannot take actions basing them on the freedom of religion if it causes harm to the public in any way. राइट, हम धर्म के नाम पर ऐसा कोई काम नहीं कर सकते हैं जो पब्लिक हेल्थ को किसी भी प्रकार से नुकसान पहुंचाए. तो व्हाट इज दिस प्रीफिक्स देन डूइंग? इट इज सेटिंग कंडीशंस प्रेसिडेंट फॉर लीगल प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ रिलीजियस प्रैक्टिसेस ऑफ एनी कम्युनिटी. सो कंडीशंस प्रेसिडेंट means that precedent means an event that has happened earlier and it is used legally to show the way in which we can proceed now. Right, we can take the precedent as a model or an example. तो precedent को हम मिसाल की तौर पे ले सकते हैं. और ये prefix क्या कर रहा है? ये prefix is setting a precedent for legal protection of religious practices of any community. So basically what this means is that yes, we have the right, the freedom of religion, but we also need to keep in mind public morality and health. The next line, the closing words of this prefatory rider in Article 25 virtually constitute a subordination clause placing other fundamental rights mentioned in Part 3 over and above the right to religious freedom. So, prefatory rider means prefix again. So, what this prefix does is that it's creating something like a subordination clause, right? An additional clause that ultimately is placing other fundamental rights over the right to religious freedom. And what other fundamental rights are more important now than right to religious freedom? That's in the next line. It says, among those fundamental rights is the right to equality before law and equal protection of laws assured at the outset and elaborated in later articles. तो जो फंडामेंटल राइट्स राइट टू रिलीजियस फ्रीडम से ज़्यादा इम्पॉर्टेंट है वो है राइट टू इक्वालिटी एंड इक्वल प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ लॉज दे आर अश्योर्ड एट द आउटसेट meaning that they are given right at the beginning and then they are elaborated, that is explained in detail in later articles, to mean inter alia that the state shall not deny equal protection of laws to any person or group of persons on the basis of religion alone. Inter alia is a Latin phrase meaning among other things. So these rights mean a lot of things, but one thing that is mentioned here, among other things, it also means that the state shall not deny equal protection of laws to any person, groups on the basis of religion, right? So just to sum up this passage, it's talking about the constitution and the various rights. Now this is quite a complicated matter and the state needs to ensure that nobody exploits these rights in any way. So it has placed provisions on each of these. Why is that? Because it is very easy for someone to claim freedom of religion and commit crimes. So what the state has done, it has prefixed this right with other rights like right to equality and equal protection before law to make sure that such exploitation does not happen, right? This is the basic meaning of the passage. Now they've asked you to infer something from it, to draw an inference. So when you think about the passage, what is it exactly trying to tell you, right? It tells us that we have rights, but there are also checks and balances in the form of provisions to these rights. So keep that in mind when we look at the options. Now, the first option says, state shall not interfere with the religious affairs of the citizens. So here we're talking about the state not interfering at all. Now this is quite contradictory to the passage. Passage में जो लिखा है उसके ये खिलाफ जाता है. Passage में हमें ये बताया गया है कि जो prefix है वो religious freedom पे limit डालता है, right? And these limits are provided by the state itself. So through the right to equality and the equal protection right, the state is in some way interfering with the right to religious freedom. So A is not our answer. Now don't take this in a negative way. This interference is for the benefit of the public itself and to ensure that nobody exploits this right. I hope that's clear. Now option number B says religious freedom under the constitution is open to state intervention. State intervention again means interference of the state. It means that the state will interfere when it sees fit. This might be an option, right? This intervention is through other provisions. The passage is talking about this. This might be an option. Option number C says religious freedom of the citizens is not covered under fundamental rights. Now this is simply incorrect. The passage tells us that Article 25 grants us religious freedom. So C is also not the answer. Option number D says religious practices of any community are immune to state laws. Immune means that it's resistant. That is, the state laws have no effect on religious practices of any community. Now this is also going against the passage because the passage tells us that if religious practices in any way harm another community, then the state will take action because there is also right to equality and equal protection before laws, right? So option number D is also not the answer. That leaves us with option number B, which is the right answer.